So this chapter starts off with a flashback of Higuruma talking to like some law guy. I don't think we saw him in chapter 159. But this guy is basically suggesting that Higuruma tries to become a judge instead of what he originally wanted to become, which was like either a prosecutor or a defender. And later on, we're going to come back to this flashback and Higuruma is going to reveal that he feels that he's not ambitious enough to become a judge, but he also keeps telling himself that all people are, quote, weak and ugly, which plays into Higuruma's hyperbolic manga personality in this chapter. But then we're coming to the present and picking up from the end of the previous chapter where Yuji had requested a retrial from Judge Man. And Judge Man accused Yuji of mass murder because of what Sukuna had done in the Shibuya arc. And Yuji immediately pled guilty to it, but like real nonchalantly and casually, like he didn't care. And I guess this angered Judge Man because this is like his thing. So if you kind of like make a mockery of it, I guess it's gonna upset him. And he's like, guilty, confiscation, death penalty. Then it explains what happens after that. So first it takes their curse technique, or with Yuji's case, the ability to use cursed energy, or just cursed energy in general, which is insane, but it's fine because that's only the tip of the iceberg here. Then it turns Higuruma's Gavel Shikai into a cursed energy sword, known as the Executioner's Sword. And then we get the juiciest bit of exposition here, and it says, without exception, anyone cut by the Executioner's Sword will die. Yeah, I know that's crazy. And it's worded very specifically, without exception. And that started to make my mind wander because I was like thinking, wow, we know so much about Higuruma's domain expansion. I would say more so than we know about maybe any other domain expansion. Usually when domain expansions have been revealed throughout the series, we get like a couple exposition dumps within one single chapter. And since then, we've had a couple chapters with this character. The exposition and our understanding of it has matured with each chapter. So then it made me think, where does this start? Oh, it has to come from Kenjaku, naturally, right? Because back in chapter 136, after Kenjaku gets Mahito's curse technique, Idol Transfiguration, he like does this crazy thing where he remotely casts it, where he's like blasting this Jujutsu EMP out through Japan, and it's affecting all of the people he had previously marked. So with Idol Transfiguration, he's now altering them so that whatever he wanted to happen to them is now going to happen. He essentially gave them a pre-order for either a curse technique or for them to become like a Sukuna contemporary. But more specifically, he says, the people who I had ingest cursed objects like Yuji, and the people with cursed techniques whose brains were meant to be non-sorcerers like Junpei, I adjusted their brains for sorcery. To the former, I gave strength as vessels. To the latter, the capacity to use curse techniques. So we know that Idol Transfiguration can alter the soul. So like I said, the people with the forced pre-orders from Kenjaku now got their deliveries. And people like Sumiki, Megumi's sister, but namely Higuruma, got his beastly Judge Man curse technique. And he got it because it was seemingly given to him by Kenjaku. Now that either means that Kenjaku like got Judge Man first, or he belonged to Geto. I think he probably belonged to Geto because Judge Man is ostensibly also like a cursed spirit, right? So he is susceptible to cursed spirit manipulation. I don't see why not, because Geto was essentially going to do that to Akotsu with Rika, right? He was going to take Rika from Akotsu. And also Geto used that Kuchisaki curse against Toji, and it like instantly activated its domain expansion, which is essentially the same thing that Judge Man would do. So I'm thinking that Geto probably had Judge Man. And if that is true, why didn't he bust that out sooner? Because man, that thing is broken. So maybe it was with Kenjaku, but also why didn't he bust it out sooner? Because it's already ridiculously powerful in the hands of a grade 1 like Higuruma. But imagine it in the hands of a special grade like Kenjaku. In theory, he could even kill Tengen with this, because it says without exception. So even a being like Tengen, who is a concept of a consciousness, would be killed by this, right? Which brings me back to what I've been saying for these last couple chapters, and it's that Kenjaku wants Higuruma to have this for a specific reason, and we, the audience, are getting so familiarized with this because I think it's ultimately a part of Kenjaku's master plan, meaning we're going to see this come back into play. And the without exception, anyone cut by the Executioner's Sword will die. It has to come into play. That's just the way that I see it. Like, I'm sure the guys from 1,000 years ago that are in the culling game right now are going to be built up to be like unstoppably powerful, powerful, and then suddenly like one of them to get their comeuppance at the hands of like the executioner's sword of deadly sentencing. But anyway, I digress. We're coming back to Higuruma, and like I said earlier, he has like this hyperbolic manga personality, and it's on full blast in this sequence where he's having essentially a breakdown. And at first read, the reader is led to believe that Higuruma is upset because he thinks that Yuji is in fact guilty because he pled to guilty, meaning that Yuji's like a murderer. And it ties back into why Higuruma is just upset about everything, you know, stemming from chapter 159, but just slash his life in general. But it actually turns out that he's angry that Yuji just pled guilty at all because he actually secretly knows that Yuji is innocent. But we'll get into that later. So Yuji does this cool little distraction where he throws like 100 chairs at him at once along with like his hoodie, all in an effort to do like this cool sweep move. But genius Higuruma, just too good. He evades it. And then we come to what I was talking about, how he actually knows the information that Judge Man has. He told Yuji and the audience that he doesn't share Judge Man's information. So it's kind of like a reverse binding vow, as to where Higuruma just lies and gains the ability of withholding knowledge from you. Before he's about to bring the executioner's sword down, he looks at Yuji in the eye, and then he like closes his eyes and deactivates the sword, and Yuji nails him in the gut. Like the cleanest strike he's landed in the fight so far, and it's also the last one. The whole eye thing reminds him of the kid from chapter 159. And then he says, as we all know, Article 39, Clause 1 of the Penal Code, the absence of reason and or control signifies non-compos menace, which essentially means he couldn't control himself because Sukuna possessed his body. Therefore, he didn't abandon self-control voluntarily. Meaning, of course, he's innocent, and Higuruma knew this. But like I said, he's just confused as to why Yuji would still admit, and that's because Yuji still feels it's his fault, because he still wasn't strong enough to stop Sukuna from overtaking his consciousness, which is understandable, and I'm sure a lot of us have felt this way. I do myself a lot, actually, and I'm sure Gege does. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is a little bit of his projection onto Yuji. But then in a twist, Higuruma decides to give his 100 points to Yuji, but then he hands him a chair and they both sit across from each other, and I guess we're going into the epilogue here because Higuruma wants to have like a conversation with him, and he says, "Have you ever killed anyone of your own will?" And Yuji says yes, because we know that's like a big element of Yuji's growth in season 1 and also going to be in season 2. And then Higuruma says, "I see. Didn't it feel awful?" And in the final panel, we see like these two people with their heads removed in front of them, and we see like a desk or something. So either this could be the continued flashback of what we saw earlier in this chapter with him talking to that guy who's trying to convince him to become a judge, or this is a continuation to the flashback from chapter 159 when he's like, "We're having a retrial." So it's possible that Judge Man did wind up killing people in that trial. I thought maybe everyone was going to survive that somehow because, you know, Higuruma's not like a bad guy, but maybe something happened and maybe those are like the guards or something and Judge Man killed them, or he killed them in self-defense accidentally maybe or something. Or maybe this is the result of confiscation and he didn't necessarily want this to happen, which goes back into him not being the judge. Or this could be how he claims he got the 100 points defending himself against other sorcerers and stuff. These could be the sorcerers that he was forced to defend himself against. Pretty much the same situation as Yuji. So we've got a couple options here, and I'm legitimately interested in seeing where it goes. I like Higuruma, and like I said before, I hope he joins the main cast here, at least for the rest of the arc, or I mean, even for the rest of the series. Just become like an ally to Yuji. Let me know what you think about this chapter in the comments, guys. If you liked the video, please give it a like, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day. See you in the next one.